All right, guys, we'll pick it up from here. Did he have help? The top law officer in Vegas says yes, he did. That madman who turned a music festival into a killing field could not have acted alone. And the killer's girlfriend says she had no warning of the horrors he was about to unleash. I'm Harris Faulkner. Let's go Outnumbered Overtime now. Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo is now breaking down a timeline of Sunday's concert massacre. The sheriff says Stephen Paddock fired hundreds of rounds of bullets for a full 10 minutes from his Las Vegas hotel suite, as thousands of music fans, as we know, were running for their lives. Lombardo says he believes the killer had to have had help, given an elaborate escape plan that the sheriff says only a superhero could have pulled off alone. And Paddock's girlfriend, through her attorney, says she had no idea what he was plotting.
I knew Stephen Paddock as a kind, caring, quiet man. I loved him and hoped for a quiet future together with him. He never said anything to me or took any action that I was aware of that I understood in any way to be a warning that something horrible like this was going to happen.
We brought you moments ago live breaking details from the fire department now for the very first time in all of this. Senior correspondent Adam Housley has been on the story from the beginning. And Adam, this continues to kind of rack up the facts now. We are learning so much more.
We are learning a lot more, but there's still a lot of loose ends. There's still no telltale sign of what happened here. And we know that, and it was a bit of a surprise last night when the sheriff in the press conference mentioned that he believed that the madman, the killer, would have worked with somebody possibly. We've been told that very early on, and folks that are close to this, the people that are working this case have said, hey, it makes the most sense to us that he possibly worked with somebody. But you're not going to go on air and say that. They're not going to go out in front of the public and say that because they don't have the piece of evidence to show it. But the sheriff still went on in that press conference and mentioned it. Take a listen.
What we know is Stephen Paddock is a man who spent decades acquiring weapons and ammo and living a secret life, much of which will never be fully understood. He had to have some help at some point. Maybe he's, you know, a super yahoo that was working out all this on his own, but it'd be hard for me to believe that.
Now, the report that came out last night that the fuel tanks, the jet fuel tanks, which are about 1,100 feet from the actual windows of where he was shooting, which is actually right adjacent to us. We saw them actually looking at those and inspecting them Monday morning. The report from the local newspaper saying that he was targeting those. Every single person we've spoken to working this case said they don't know that. They may never know that. And then the explosive expert from one of the agencies told me this, said even if he did hit it, and meant to do it many times, it would not explode. They're designed to withstand that type of attack. The only exception would be if you use an incendiary round, but even then that would be difficult. Almost all those tanks are self-sealing in case of puncture. So at this hour, really what it comes back to, Harris, is the idea of trying to put together the web of what caused all this. We've heard the reports now that he may have gone and looked at other hotels in front of other places that were having concerts, and they're looking into that. And one reason why, to give it back to you, they're doing these press conferences is it's jogging people's memories, i.e. these hotels that may have seen him or knew about him or looked him up and were like, he was here.
Yeah, it's such a great point because people have fanned out and gone back to where they wanted to go or needed to get to. And so you want to jog their memories because this is something that they don't want to have fresh in their minds. It's so tough to deal with. Adam Housley, thank you very much for bringing us even more new information. You talk about figuring out that web. Let's bring in somebody who can help us do that. Randy Sutton is a former lieutenant on the Las Vegas police force and the host of Blue Lives Radio. And Randy, you've joined us this week as the story was breaking. And we bring you back now because you have your own sources and connections on the ground, and maybe you can help us work through some of the details. One of the things that pops today, of course, is the Sheriff Lombardo saying last night that he could not have done this without help. What indications from the evidence that we know about suggest that?
I think it's just the totality of the circumstances and the amount of planning and logistics that went into this. It sounded more like conjecture than actual evidence to me. Now, there's something that was interesting that was brought up to me a little bit earlier, which I find that might play a role. Remember that in the press conference yesterday, the sheriff was talking about the cameras that were set up. There were just cameras that were set up outside to look into the hallway, which resulted in him opening fire on the security officer and the police. And then there was also mention of one in the peephole, but there was a fourth one, and that was the baby monitor setup. Now, I'm not sure about those other cameras, but if I'm not mistaken, those baby monitors can be broadcast to another location. So the possibility, if this guy really did have help, was he using this baby monitor video to broadcast it to someone else who might have been tuned in to that particular frequency?
Wow. Having owned many baby monitors with my little ones, I can tell you that they can be broadcast that way. And in fact, you can listen in from areas from the neighbor's house. And I'm not exaggerating. That is true. That was sometimes a complication. So what you're suggesting now, beyond the point of conjecture, is based on the fact of what something can do. Are there any other indications, and maybe your connections there on the ground, that he may have had help, or if not before, certainly then after this began happening?
Well, you know, there was also mention yesterday, and the sheriff said that there was something found that indicated that he planned to escape from this. Now, I find that really interesting, because if there was, if in his mind he was not going to end his life during this thing, and he truly wanted to escape, then he would probably need help to do that. So I'm just wondering, from that comment as well, that might have been part of the indication of why the sheriff mentioned that there might have been help involved here.
So talk to me about some of the things we know. We know that that Stephen Paddock reportedly wired $100,000 to his girlfriend, which we're getting to know, Marilou Danley, while she was in the Philippines. And we don't know the source of that. We don't know, I should say, the indication for it. Was it for her to stay out of the country? Was it for her family? They haven't told us if they've asked her and have that answer. But there are some things like that that are out there. What else?
Well, you know, the fact of the matter is, unless he educated himself by getting training materials and going to ranges, the way that he modified his firearms and collected his firearms, this could be where the help came in. You know, that's one of my major questions. Where did he obtain all these firearms? And this is what the ATF is really, really good at.
All legal, by the way.
Right.
There were background checks for the
modified
purchases that they could trace.
And where did he receive the training that he obviously had in these tactics? Because what he set up was not your layman's, you know, just as, hey, Joe Blow is going to go set up surveillance cameras, and I mean, this was really sophisticated. So did he have help in creating this nest of death?
You know, I want to ask you something that you told one of my team a little while ago as they were talking with you for this interview. You had something to say about how he broke out those windows. What is the significance of that?
Well, this is kind of interesting. I did get from a source that I spoke to yesterday that when he broke out the windows, of course, he had a sledgehammer. We saw that in one of the photographs. He had a sledgehammer that he clearly planned to do this. But when he did break out the windows, that glass fell down into a valet area, apparently, and some of the valets then, they heard the glass, they saw the glass coming down, and then heard the gunfire, and that they were instrumental in helping to locate the floor where this shooting was taking place. Wow,
that is such an interesting detail, because we've wondered, well, what triggered that timing, if you will, of people going up? You had that off-duty security guard, as you were saying, others who might have heard something, and now we find out through your sourcing there in Las Vegas. And we want to remind everybody, how long were you a police officer with the Las Vegas PD?
Well, I was a police officer. I retired with 24 years on as a lieutenant. All
right. So you've got some strong connections in that town, and what you're saying is that the valet drivers who were below are getting hit by glass from him pounding out that glass.
Yeah, and that's a fact that came out just yesterday evening, as a matter of fact, and then so the glass comes down on them, and then they hear the gunshots, and they were able to apparently help identify which floor they were coming from, and that's probably how security and law enforcement was able to isolate it to those few floors. And I just want to correct one thing, that the security guard was not off duty. He was on working,
duty. Yes.
but he was unarmed security officer.
All right, I want to get to you a little bit about Marilou Danlou. And Marilou Danlou is his companion. She's being described as his girlfriend. She, through her attorney and her relatives, have said, I didn't know anything was coming. I didn't know anything about this. I love this man. Now that we know some of the answers that are coming out through her attorney, what are some questions do you think that are still pertinent? Because I always hear police officers like yourself say, she may not even realize how much she knows.
Yeah, that's right. You know, he may not have shared with her the details of his operation and what he was going to be doing, or even, you know, some of his philosophical viewpoints. However, if you're in close proximity with someone, if you're living with someone, then, you know, just by osmosis, you're going to absorb some of what that person is living through. You know, you're going to know this individual unless it's some type of weird dysfunctional relationship where nothing is shared. You know, and of course we don't know the dynamics of that relationship. Although we did hear from one source who apparently at a coffee shop that said they dreaded when this couple came in because he verbally berated her all the time. Now that could be an indication that he was the dominant in this relationship, and that she, quote, knew her place, unquote, not to ask questions. So, you know, that's part of what the interview with her was so important with the FBI in gleaning this type of information about the relationship.
Well, I tell you, Mr. Sutton, I bet you were a heck of a detective reading between lines and everything else. Real quickly, we heard from the fire department for the first time at length today. We covered it on Outnumbered last hour about their military-like anti-terrorism task force that they set up. They said if this had happened 10 years ago, they would have not have been able to save as many lives and respond the way they had. It really does take a concerted effort, and I know a lot is looking at the sheriff's department and the police department, but I wanted to give you last word on just how big a role the fire department and others played on Sunday night.
Huge, absolutely huge. Now, keep in mind, Harris, that the Metro Police Department is both the Sheriff's Department and the police. The Sheriff's Department and the City of Las Vegas PD combined in 1972 to form the Metropolitan Police. So it's one large police department that covers 8,000 square miles.
Wow.
So that's the main jurisdiction. But since the events of the last number of years, the police department, fire department, paramedics, the ambulance services, they all work very closely together in preparation for what we have always believed would happen would be a terrorist incident. This doesn't come as a shock. It's just the methodology of how it took place did. You know, there have been preparations for these. There have been joint drills. And what the fire department captain said is very, very true. These men and women are exceedingly dedicated to what they do, and they showed extreme bravery, just as many of the off-duty police officers and military personnel who were attending this conference did, and also just plain good American citizens. And this is why, Harris, that it pains me when I hear politicians try and play this against each other again. This is the time, Harris, that America must come together. This is the time when Democrats and Republicans and black and white and Hispanic all need to come together, because this country cannot remain divided. This is a watershed moment. This is a time when we need to come together.
Randy Sutton, a police officer in Las Vegas for decades, really rounding it out and putting a button on it for us as Americans in total, and giving us some interesting details in that investigation per your sources. Thank you so much, Randy. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me, Harris.
All right, but politics are still going to come into play, right? Hillary Clinton has a book to sell, and now she's speaking out on guns. She's slamming President Trump and the Republican Party over the gun debate. Is now the time? Just how much do Americans really want to hear from her? And we'll talk about giving away less of your hard-earned money to Uncle Sam with the chairman of the powerful House Ways and Means Committee. There's a group of Democrats indicating that they are on board with parts of the Republican tax plan. A big vote happened today, and it leads us into making tax reform happen. The budget, we'll talk about it. Stay close.
At the very center of that plan is a giant, beautiful, massive, the biggest ever in our country, tax cut.
A lot cooking this afternoon. Just a short time ago, House lawmakers approved their budget plan for the next fiscal year. Republicans now paving the way for tax reform after President Trump gave the issue a campaign-style push last week. Now, add this ingredient into the mix. Conservative House Democrats, a group of them, now embracing some parts of the Republican tax plan, including lowering business taxes. It's still unclear whether they can resolve any differences they might have to support the Republican plan outright. But are we moving forward or over-optimistic? Let's bring in Republican Congressman Kevin Brady of Texas, chairman of the House and Ways and Means Committee. And let me just say, for a point of fact, your committee plays a huge role in how the government raises money and happens to be the oldest committee in all of the U.S. Congress. How important is today's budget vote?
Yeah, very important. And first, congratulations, Harris, on this show. It's really exciting, and thank you for having me on your first week.
Very
much.
It's
terrific. Yeah, so a lot is cooking. This budget is huge. First time in 31 years we have a budget that allows us to move forward on pro-growth, pro-family, pro-middle class, tax reform in a big way. So today's vote is critical, and now it goes over to the Senate where they need to deliver to.
Mm-hmm. And what I understand is that this kind of does away, it allows those in the Senate specifically to avoid with filibustering, which would mean that things would move along quicker.
Yeah, it really does. What it means really is that no one party can obstruct tax reform from going to the president's desk. It doesn't preclude Republicans and Democrats together working on tax reform. In fact, I think, Democrats bring good ideas to the table as well. And you mentioned it a little in your lead-in, but look, when I visit with Democrats, they want a very strong middle-class tax cut. They want to see our jobs coming back from overseas. They want to see Main Street businesses growing again. So I'm hopeful that there are still JFK Democrats who know America needs to be able to compete and win.
Who's on board among those Democrats that you think you can count on?
So I don't want to speak for any Democrat. What I know from our discussions with them...
That's very well politically said.
Well, it is, but it's true. And here, look, they have a fair request. They don't want to just vote on tax reform. They want to help shape and be engaged in those discussions and the hard trade-offs that come with it. I think that's a fair request. I'm looking for ways that we can do that.
Congressman Brady, I want to get a couple of numbers from you if I can. The business cut has been one that, people look at because it could help create jobs, and it's ballooning now. So what number do you think you might be able to get to and get some consensus on?
Yes, so what we're looking for businesses is about a 40% cut in taxes, whether you're the smallest mom and pop or entrepreneur or you're the biggest company in America. We picked that rate because that's what it takes to compete and win against China, Europe, Mexico, and Canada. That's a key rate. It is the lowest rate in modern history, but that's what it takes if America's going to win.
Well, and I've heard the president say, too, that this would also allow businesses to write off equipment and things in the year that they're happening, and that real-time tax cutting is what businesses really need.
Yeah, I tell you, that is so pro-growth, it's explosive, because in effect, it's a zero tax rate for investing in your workers, in new technology, in new equipment. That's going to, along with the lower rates, vault America into the lead pack, one of the best places on the planet for that next new job or that next new manufacturing plant.
Can you do some myth busting for me? Because I really want to understand, why is it that the Democrats say that the Republicans don't have the back of the middle class and that they're going to cut taxes for the wealthy? What is the fact there? I just want to understand it.
Yeah, you know, they've been saying that so long, I'm not sure they can stop. So our tax reform plan has a major, significant tax relief for the middle class. We want Americans at every income level to keep more of what they've earned. And look, we want to get paychecks going as well. So we want to keep more of what you earn. We want you to earn more as well. And that's why we put an emphasis on our Main Street local businesses, because when they're hiring, when they're promoting, increasing those wages, man, everybody, every middle-class family wins.
All right, I asked you for two numbers. Can you give me a number with regard to the middle class? Anything that attaches itself to an actual cut that they would feel?
Yeah, and so not yet, and here's why. We're still finalizing the income tax brackets. That is so we can deliver a very strong middle-class tax cut as well. And as you know, we're simplifying the code so much that 9 out of 10 Americans will be able to file using a simple postcard-style system. We want to make sure we've really got that in good shape.
Yeah, I would probably guess the number is much smaller than that, people who can actually do their taxes on a postcard. Real quickly, so this moves tax reform forward. When is the first next group of meetings where you'll get together with Democrats? What's next?
So we'll continue those discussions. We're talking about how they can be engaged in the process, so that will be ongoing. In the meantime, we're meeting daily with lawmakers from across the country about the areas that they really want, they really like, other areas where they have suggestions. So each day we work to improve this to be ready when that budget is signed, sealed, and delivered. We're bringing tax reform out, and we're going to begin to act.
Congressman Brady from the great state of Texas, thank you, sir, for your time.
Thanks, Harris.
Well, President Trump has already faced multiple tests as both commander-in-chief and consoler-in-chief. We'll look at the crises he's been dealing with and how his responses have been received.
He was like super nice. He wasn't really seen on social media. He was much more comforting.
Following Sunday's massacre in Las Vegas, stories of the victims from there continue to pour in, and they are amazing. Families, though, are grieving all over the world, and of course, locally for their loved ones. 58 people gunned down. Hundreds remain in the hospital now. The president, as we showed you here on Fox News, met with the families of victims yesterday, first responders and the wounded. Here's President Trump talking after that visit.
The mass murder that took place on Sunday night fills America's heart with grief. We pray for the recovery of the injured and those injured officers who so bravely threw themselves into danger when duty called. And we grieve the loss of the law enforcement personnel who were killed in this vicious attack.
Will Carr is live outside the University Medical Center in Vegas. Will?
Hey there, Harris. There are still more than 170 patients in local hospitals here in Las Vegas. But as the numbers go down, we're hearing more and more stories of survival, including from a set of twins, both of whom were at the concert on Sunday night, both of whom were shot. Gianna Bonca says it will take a month for her to get back on her feet. Her sister Natalia is still in the hospital.
It doesn't really feel like it was real, honestly. It feels like a dream still, and like I was like shot. Like, it's just crazy to me how someone would like actually do that.
Others who walked away physically unscathed tell us that they feel lucky as they're coming to visit their friends and their family here at the hospitals in Las Vegas. That includes Aaron Cotter, whose father is in the ICU here at University Medical Center.
I pray for everybody and that their families and that were affected make full recoveries, and the ones that lost their families, my condolences to all of you.
And to help all of the victims here, there's a local GoFundMe page. At last check, Harris, they've raised just over $9 million for everybody impacted here. Harris.
Will, thank you very much. Las Vegas, of course, is just the latest crisis President Trump has dealt with since taking office. Remember, he has responded to 3 major hurricanes, the deadly violence in Charlottesville, and looming threats from North Korea on the list. For more on how the president is handling it all, let's bring in Chris Wallace, anchor of Fox News Sunday. Chris, good to see you always. This is unsurmountable. I mean, just in terms of the crises that the nation has faced. Consoler-in-chief has been the role for this president more often than not.
It is extraordinary. First of all, Harris, let me say congratulations on your new show.
Thank you.
Well deserved. We're all very excited. In terms of the president, you know, the president has his agenda, and the world and life has its agenda. And oftentimes, as in most of our lives, you know, you don't get to control what gets thrown at you. And this president, in the last month or so, in addition to the things that he obviously knew he was going to have, like Iran and North Korea, etc., obviously has had this extraordinary set of hurricanes, and now this, what I guess is the worst mass murder in modern U.S. history.
Yeah. You know, you have covered presidencies where different things have happened. I mean, early for Barack Obama, it was the BP oil spill. It's not that presidents don't have those moments. We've had Orlando, Oak Creek, Wisconsin, the theater in Aurora, Colorado. Things have happened in this country, not to mention the natural disasters. What is it that you have reported on over the years, Chris, that you've seen that really prepares the president for those big moments, or do you just grow in the role?
I was about to say, until I heard the second half of your question, I'm not sure anything prepares you for it. Clearly, a politician who has been a governor or a mayor has had to deal with problems in their jurisdictions. That may prepare them a bit. Obviously, Donald Trump, as a non-politician, hasn't had to deal in this kind of a public role with unexpected disasters, either natural or man-made. And so I think to a large degree, whether they're prepared or not, they have to grow in the role. One of the clearest and most dramatic and most horrible examples is George W. Bush and his response after 9/11, when he went down to ground zero and with his arm around that guy with a hard hat, said the whole world will hear your response, and then made that beautiful speech at the National Cathedral, and then summoned the nation to unity after the worst terror attack on the homeland in our history. You saw it with Barack Obama, with a series of mass murders during his time in office, and we're seeing it now with this president, who, as much as he may have thought he was prepared for the job, obviously is learning that there are demands that are put on any commander-in-chief that they can't fully prepare for.
You know, I ask for that overall view because the critics of this president have been quick and fierce to jump on him.
Well, he's a polarizing figure. There's no question about it. And I think sometimes the criticism has been legitimate and sometimes it hasn't. From everything we've seen, the president's response to the hurricanes in Texas and Florida, and when I say the president's response, much more important than his is the administration which he runs. The response of FEMA and all of the federal officials to Irma and Harvey was first rate. There don't seem to be any complaints about the response there. There obviously have been many more complaints about the response to the Maria and the situation in Puerto Rico, both in terms of the president's personal response and the slow bureaucracy, obviously trying to send relief to an island in the middle of the Caribbean is a lot more complicated. In terms of Las Vegas, and again, everybody's going to have their own judgment on this.
No, it's true.
The president seemed to put, didn't put a foot wrong yesterday. It seemed to be very consoling, very uplifting. You hear stories about he was going into these hospital rooms with the survivors and their families, and laughter coming out that he was lifting their spirits, and people seem to be very appreciative for the president's response there.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are some members of the media, though, you just wonder if you'll ever hear that balance in that coverage. Before I let you go, I've got to ask you quickly about the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, having to speak to answer back on NBC News reporting that he said something untoward about the president on the very day that the president is playing consoler-in-chief in Vegas. Awkward, but obviously necessary moment.
Yeah, but, you know, the fact that Rex Tillerson didn't refute it himself, he had his spokesperson, Heather Nauert, do it. There are an awful lot of people in Washington who say that that the Secretary of State said it, and I'm not sure that, you know, there's an appropriate time to report it. I don't think
Chris,
the media can...
if he did say it, is he in trouble? And if he did or didn't, does it matter in the overall picture?
No, and is he in trouble? One hears, I mean, the reporting, and certainly my sources say that there are definite tensions between the president and the Secretary of State, but much less to do with whether or not he called him a moron, and much more to do with the fact that they seem to see foreign policy differently. You had this big difference over the weekend where Rex Tillerson said we have back channels to talk to North Korea, and the next day the president undercut him and said, don't waste your time. Having said that, look, we went through all of this between the president and Attorney General Sessions. Last time I checked, Jeff Sessions is still the Attorney General. So clearly this president and people under him can have falling out, and they find their way back to each other. And I would think that with all of the upheaval you've had in this administration, the president is in no hurry to get rid of Rex Tillerson, whether he likes him or not, at least in the short term.
Chris Wallace, thank you so much. Great to see you. We'll see you on Sunday. Everybody check your listings on broadcast stations in your area. Got to brag on you a little bit. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Well, Hillary Clinton is back in the spotlight. Did I mention she has a book to sell? Well, she's making the most of it by slamming Republicans over gun control after the national tragedy in Las Vegas. She says the GOP is, quote, totally sold to the gun lobby, end quote. How is that unifying? Our power panel comes in to weigh in. What happened? Well, Hillary Clinton is at it again, trying to answer that question. She has vowed to not keep quiet on issues that she cares about. So now she's going after President Trump and all Republicans over guns just days after the Las Vegas massacre. Watch.
I can't believe that one whole political party in the greatest country on earth is totally sold to the gun lobby. The vast majority of Americans and the vast majority of gun owners know we need common sense gun safety measures.
Got to bring in some power. The power panel, that is. Opinion editor and columnist for the Washington Times, Charlie Hurt. Fox News political analyst Jamu Green. She's also a former candidate for the DNC chair. You know, I'm just going to look down here. I'm going to start with something that you said in my notes here that we took earlier, Jamu. Hillary Clinton is a value add. Do millions of people really want to hear what she has to say about gun control or anything else?
She's certainly a value add to the Democratic Party. There are millions of Democratic voters that Democrats can't win without these voters, and that has to be a part of the conversation in the same way that that is said about Bernie Sanders. But there are probably at least 3 million more Americans who want to hear from her than want to hear from the president.
Oh, you're back to election night in the votes.
Just back to how the fact that she actually beat him by 3 million votes.
Right.
So that's not a rejection of the American people. Yes, he won strategically by using the Electoral College, and that's what our Constitution lays out. But that doesn't mean that there aren't millions of people who want to hear her voice. In the same way that everyone's talking about every decision Trump does at the dinner table, they want to hear what Hillary Clinton has to say.
For your party, I hope you're right. Because if you're saying that your party can't win again without Hillary Clinton and the votes that she can bring, I would say that Republicans are going to dance a dance I don't know the steps to yet. Teach me.
Well, the real problem here with what Hillary Clinton just said there is that, and I think this does point to why people, I think, more and more don't want to hear from Hillary Clinton, and I think that she's problematic for the Democratic Party, is that her reaction to this, she went right to a political thing. It's the same broken record, political record after a tragedy that people don't want to hear, and they don't want this politicized. This isn't a time for trying to score political points. And Donald Trump, for all of his failings and faults, he doesn't automatically turn into a political robot in these situations. He goes and he does these things.
He does turn into a political robot. He does certainly play to his base. And if you look at all of the different crises that you just covered in the previous segment that he's dealt with, since he became president, he has made some significant missteps. He's done good at some times, but it's certainly politicized. And I don't think gun violence should be an issue that's politicized ever.
Oh, you don't?
Think about the Sandy.
So you don't think that Democrats should have been fundraising off that issue hours after this happened on Monday morning? Have you called them?
I think that's tacky. But there is a reality that the parents of Sandy Hook victims, they're not the ones saying it's too soon. They've been waiting.
Well, it's not too soon for them because it's been some distance and they are still hurting, and we pray for them. But this happens in every instance. I said this on Outnumbered last hour. You know, whether it's the radical Islamic terrorism that we see in San Bernardino or other areas, there are quick jumps to talk about certain issues, because I got to tell you, 2 weeks after Orlando, when you would hope that both sides would have been talking about something, they weren't. We had moved on. So my question is, when do you talk about it, but do you fundraise off of it? You call it tawdry, tacky. Yeah, those are some words that we can use on TV for it.
But the real problem here is that there aren't easy solutions, and when Democrats, I think, do this more than Republicans do when it comes to events like this, when you try to boil it down and come up with simple fixes, there's an implied accusation that if you're against those fixes that don't really fix anything, then you don't really care about these people that get wounded, and that's here's the thing.
2013, Senator Dianne Feinstein put a bill up to block bump stocks. That bill didn't even come up for a vote. It completely failed. Now there's conversation saying, okay, well, maybe we need to look at this. They could have looked at it after Sandy Hook when she first put that bill up. And the only way that we're going to be able to keep attention on this is by looking at incidents and using the opportunity that the media opens up. That's the only time people have an opportunity to talk about it and get support.
Quick last word.
Is when the media opens it up.
But I mean, I would argue that it puts a lie to all of the gun control laws, because, of course, automatic weapons have been illegal since Al Capone, and obviously this was some sort of workaround. But if you outlaw that workaround, there will be another workaround.
By the way, that was put into place during the Obama era. I have a couple more questions. We're going to move on to another topic, too, so I'm going to hold you guys. Power panel, you feeling still powerful?
Oh, yes.
Good. President Trump calls for Congress to investigate what he calls the fake news networks after Secretary of State Rex Tillerson denied a report that he nearly resigned. We talked a bit about it with Chris Wallace, set up some facts. Now let's debate it. Stay close.